Welcome to the Melanin Jelly Project Conversations, a podcast that celebrates diversity and representation in children's storytelling, entertainment, and edutainment. I am the host, Olunosen Louisa Ivaze. On this podcast, I chat with authors and creators of children's books, entertainment, and edutainment. This is also a collaboration with the Ottawa Black Book Club. Okay, so welcome Andrea Kurth, the author of these two lovely books. This ZAC'S Mighty Wheels series. So we have ZAC'S Mighty Wheels and the Giant Problem, and we have ZAC'S Mighty Wheels and the Case of the Missing Grannies. So welcome to the Melanin Jelly Project podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Louisa Olunosen Ivaze. I started this podcast to celebrate diversity and representation in children's storytelling. And when I heard from you, I was so excited because I was happy that someone understood the meaning of diversity and representation, that it doesn't have anything to do with what you look like. Mm-hmm. It has to do with the stories you are telling and what you're interested in putting out there. And I loved that. One thing I loved about your book was it was focused on the story and not the disability.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I had written a story about a girl with a disability. In fact, when I saw the flying wheelchair, I started laughing because the girl had a flying wheelchair, but it was pink.
Oh!
But I didn't send it off for publication because I didn't know why. After reading your book, I understood why. Okay. I was focused on the fact that she was on the wheelchair, she couldn't go up the stairs, she needed help. So now I'm going to go back and review that story and focus on the story and not on the disability. So thank you for that. So tell me about yourself and your inspiration for this lovely book. You wrote this book with your sons.
Yes. Yeah. So the first one was with my younger son, Owen, and my second one was with my older son, Braden. Owen was, he was actually 8 when we started the first one, but the first one took like 4 years. And then the second one, took less than a year, and that my son was 16 when we wrote that one. So that one just came out in December. So this is my 23rd year teaching special education, and I've taught a lot of different disabilities, kids with physical impairments, and then all of them have had cognitive impairments, intellectual disabilities, and I wasn't it wasn't on my radar that I wanted to be an author or anything, but the reason I started thinking about it was because, it was probably almost 15 years ago, we started talking about in the education world how we needed to have books that represented our students. Okay. And at the time, it was mainly talking about race. And so I was putting more books in my classroom library because I had a very diverse classroom at the time, as I do now. And so I wanted my students to feel represented. Okay. So then it was it took 4 years. So about 6-7 years ago, I started noticing that the books I was reading, I wanted to read fun chapter books. And I started thinking about there was one kid in particular, Zach, who was actually a real student of mine. And for some reason, when I was teaching him, I had this, it was just he's not represented here. Yes, maybe his race is being represented, but there's no, he's in a wheelchair and none of these books represent him. He can't actually see himself in these books, which is, what the whole concept is you should be able to see yourself in books. Mm-hmm. So, I felt like God put it on my heart that I was supposed to write one that also represented him. And then when I thought more about it, I was like, well, I don't want it just to represent one person. I want it to represent multiple people, where more people can start seeing themselves in the books. So I have Cody, who has Down syndrome. And in the book, he was actually one of my students too. In the book, you can kind of see the look that he has Down syndrome, but we don't actually talk about it. And then Anna is also a real person, and she has cerebral palsy and she has a crutch. And so the crutch was more a physical thing that you can see, and you see that in the book. And so I had those 3 kind of in the first one. Mm-hmm. And then in the second book, so then after the first one, then I'm like, okay, this is going to be a series. I just thought, okay, by the time I'm done with this series, I would kind of everyone to feel represented. And so each book, I'm going to have different disabilities represented. And like you said, it's not about the disability. It's about the adventure. It's about the story. So then in the second book, I have a student who uses a communication device. I also have, actually, it's my brother, Bobby, in the book. It has an intellectual disability. So also doesn't speak much. It shows. And then, the first kids are still in it as well. And so each book will add on more so that hopefully by the time we're done, all kids will feel represented.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And what I liked about this book was that the way you wrote the story, it just showed me that these people are more than their disabilities. Mm-hmm. They are more than these seeming limitations that they present. Because as humans, I think people are not comfortable with what they don't understand.
Yes.
I think that is it. People are not comfortable with what they don't understand. I was listening to one of the interviews you did, and you said Zach passed away.
He did. Just 5 months before the book was coming out. He knew I was writing it, and I had read him the first, I think it was like 2 chapters, like years before. And actually, when I read him those first 2 chapters, I realized I needed to change some things, because in my first version of it, he had a dad in it, and he didn't grow up with a dad. And so, it was a single mom. He didn't see his dad. And so in my first version, he had a dad. And I realized I don't need a dad in a story. And then it also made me realize that I wanted to not only represent disabilities, but also different family structures as well. And so it's kind of subtle in there. One kid lives with his aunt and his mom. You might not even notice it unless you really honed in on it and realized it. And then, we don't talk about a dad. So some people might realize, oh, I think that's a single mom, And then in the second book, we also have adoption. So, and it's just one line, it's like,
the emphasis is not on it. It's just
exactly.
Read it in passing because you know what? It's long.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So how important do you think it is for us to tell these kind of story, this kind of representation stories? How important it is? How important do you think it is for children with these diverse abilities, like some people call them? Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is for them to see themselves represented in books?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think it's important for both sides. So right now, only 3.8% of children's books have kids with disabilities, while in the U.S., 25% of the population identifies with it as having a disability. So it's way less represented in children's books at only 3.8%.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kids not feeling represented, and feeling represented helps with their self-worth, their self-esteem, making them feel that they're not invisible. So I think it's very important. They can feel like they're a part of society, and and they can do something.
Okay.
And then I was just going to say, and then also on the other side, for kids who don't have disabilities, that they can see that the children are more like them, and that, oh, wow, they just want fun adventures too. They can relate more. It would help with, less bullying and stuff like that, because they would understand it. There would be more compassion. And just like with all diversity, when they see it more, then it's, I guess, less scary in a way for kids that don't normally see kids with disabilities and stuff like that. So it's good on both sides.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that you said less scary, because a lot of people are scared of what they don't know. A lot of people are not comfortable with what they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And I always like to say that we need to get to a point in our lives in the society where we get comfortable with being uncomfortable when we talk about issues of diversity and representation. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the challenges you think as authors face when trying to tell authentic stories of representation, like this kind of story? What are some of the challenges you faced when you were working on it, writing these 2 lovely books?
Well, trying to figure out in the beginning, I was actually just like, I want the students represented. You know, I wasn't even thinking about the other side, about how it could help other kids, you know, have the empathy and have everything. I didn't even think about that part actually until I'll tell you a story I had somebody come up to me at a book fair when I was selling books, and she said she had read my first book, and she did the field day for her, you know, like for her kids' school. And after reading the field day, or after reading my book, she realized that there was a girl in a wheelchair and that wouldn't be able to do any of the games. And then after reading it, she realized that she needed to make it accessible for that girl.
Yes.
And then it like totally opened up my mind actually to like, wow, I'm not only helping, you know, the kids that, you know, need to feel represented with disabilities, but it can help other people as well. So I guess that was almost one of my challenges, was trying to wrap my head around the fact that it's just not for my students in a way, you know, like more people might like this. So in a way, it's kind of a confidence thing. That was my problem, was
because there's a huge audience out there.
I'm sorry, what?
There's a huge audience out there for this.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, there is. There's a huge audience. So did you self-publish or did you get traditionally published?
Yes, I self-published. The traditional route takes several years. And I knew Zach he had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And so I was really like the last year, like, you know, I took so long writing the first one. And then that last year, I really felt like God was putting it on my heart. You need to finish this. And then, you know, with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, normally kids typically live like, there's 18 is a common age.
I need to Google that. I don't know what exactly it is.
Yeah. It's a much rarer form of muscular dystrophy. So Zach lived till 21. And like I said, it was only 5 months shy. Unfortunately, he didn't see the final book, but now I forgot what your original question was. That's why. So that was the reason that I self-published, because I didn't want to wait 2 years to get it into his hands, and I think even now I continue to self-publish just because I want to get him out faster, and I think it helps his family to kind of see him as a superhero, you know, now even.
Oh yeah, I like that. It helps his family see him as a superhero. Yeah. So do you think that it is fair for authors who have not, like, you are writing from a position of authority because you are a teacher who works with children with special needs. Mm-hmm. Do you think it is fair for a writer who hasn't had any encounters with children with special needs to write a story about children with special needs? Because some people just write based, you know, from theory.
Yeah.
Do you think it is fair?
I guess if somebody wanted to, they need to do a lot of research. They need to make sure that they're not offending someone in any way. And I've also heard, you know, like a lot of parents write books about kids with disabilities and stuff. And I think that's great because we need books out there. Okay. But you definitely need to have people in that community reading them, making sure that you're not offending anybody. I mean, honestly, making sure that you're doing it right. And, you know, like that was one of the things with the wheelchair, you know, like, because I've been around with so many different types of disabilities over 23 years that I do know a lot of them. And just like with the illustrations, trying to get the illustrations right, you know, like the first drafts of like even the wheelchair, like I wanted the wheelchair not to look like a wheelchair that if you break your leg, you're going to go sit in a wheelchair, you know. This is a wheelchair that a kid lives in, you know, like he has to be in this chair, you know, most of the day. And so it has to be like a full size, comfortable looking wheelchair. So that was like like that's one piece of it, you know? And then like in the second book, I say something about, like, I make a joke about, because he's grounded from his wheelchair, and then he's like, how do you think you're gonna get, or how am I gonna get up the stairs? Like, he's talking to his mom, like, well, can I bounce up the stairs at least, or are you gonna, you know, pull me up like you normally have to? Because that's reality. So I wanted like a little bit of like, so like I put a joke in there about it, but then I've made lesson plans for teachers for the book. And that's actually one of the questions where I say, how do you think a kid gets upstairs who's in a wheelchair that doesn't have a superpower wheelchair? Like, how do they do that? And then I actually go into, in the lesson plans, I go into ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and how that helped now that there's ramps to get into schools and businesses and such. So although I make it super subtle in the book, you could dig deeper if you want, you know, or if you're a teacher who wants to really learn some lessons out of it as well.
Oh, okay. So I want to go to book 1, because this is the story where his chair acquired, from the wishing well, acquired the, do I call it superpowers, or became a robo chair. So tell us about book 1, what it's about, why you chose a wishing well to start the series.
Good question.
Yeah,
why did we choose a wishing well?
Yeah, there are 2 books, and we need to talk about the 2 books. So why? I think it's a golden well, but I know you got a wishing well. Yeah,
we brainstormed a bit about how he could get his superpowers, you know? And I think that was Owen's idea, my son, with the wishing well. And so the wishing well, it just kind of felt right, you know?
Like, I've read about the wishing well in ages.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, I went, oh, wishing well. Okay.
I really, like, now that you ask it, I don't remember the reason, because again, it was almost 8 years ago now. I'm gonna have to ask my son, how did we actually come up with the wishing well? It was just like, how do you make a wish? Like, if you make a wish, what do you wish? You wish on a star, you can wish in a wishing well. So it was pretty sure that was part of my 8-year-old's imagination at the time. And
and when you read books about wishing wells, it's always girls standing by the wishing wells. Hardly ever boys. It's usually girls you find at the wishing well, but hardly ever boys at the wishing well.
Yeah.
So how do you think that what are some tips you can give to for people listening to us now saying that, oh, Andrea writes these books about representation where she focuses on the story rather than the disability? What tips would you give potential writers who want to write similar stories? What has worked for you and what hasn't worked in your writing process?
What has worked is just kind of throwing it all out there. Like, you know, putting all the ideas out there of what you might possibly want to do, and then kind of seeing what works, you know, like, and then, you know, like, definitely asking for help, you know, definitely having editors are huge. You have to have an editor to have a successful book. And then just like, you know, like, I had quite a few people read them and like, what's missing, you know, like, just even my son and I brainstorming about how the wings would go out, you know, like, cause we want it to work, you know, like, so if you're so you could really imagine it and be like, okay, well, yeah, so if he pushes forward, then the wings fly out, and like how it all can go. So, so that's a piece of it. And then like, what hasn't worked?
What hasn't worked? Yes, in the writing process.
Yeah. Well, so like the challenges have been like timelines are one of those things.
It took you what, 4 years?
For the first one, yeah. And then the second one, I actually, even though it was done in really less than a year, it still was. I wanted it done before like the December date. But, I got a new illustrator this last time, and he's amazing. He did an amazing job. But trying to get the characters right, trying to, I was very particular. I don't want, trying to get an illustration of a kid with Down syndrome is really difficult. And especially if, the illustrator didn't necessarily work with kids with disabilities. So I sent him a ton of pictures, and then, and he ended up doing a very good job. But, so timeline wise, I was really particular about things like, oh, wait, he doesn't have, the control panel in this picture, we need to go back in and do that. Oh, wait, honestly, at first, the pictures of Blake, he didn't actually look black. So he's one of ZAC'S best friends. And as you can see on the cover, but then in the internal pictures, they're black and white pictures. Okay. And I was like, no, I want it to for sure know that, he is black and Jasmine is Middle Eastern. And so the coloring, the shading had to be done different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that one thing I've noticed with some books is when they represent black characters, they look, I feel that they draw white kids and just color them black. Yeah.
Yeah.
They miss out the features. They miss out our lips, the thick hair, you understand, the nose. They miss out a lot of that. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. So, right. We even discussed Blake's hair. It was at first, zooming in on some of these pictures, I'm like, no,
Because I seem to like the drawings in the second book. I seem to prefer the drawings here than this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one, but this one got me. I really like this one.
Yeah, he did an amazing job. The first book, she's a student going into illustration, and she did a great job. Being a student, she was very inexpensive since she was a student, and since it was my first book, I didn't know where this was gonna go. So it was having to put my own money out there, doing this. So she was perfect for the first book, and then she actually couldn't do the second book, and then it worked out that I found Justin, because I think he did a brilliant job with the illustrations.
Yeah, and I like that in the first story, you touched on the relationship between him and Zach and his mom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm looking at page 29 where you said the giant problem. The weekend was exciting for Zach, flying around in his new wheelchair and learning what made his mom scream the loudest. His mom had been quite overprotective from the moment Zach was born, as most moms are, but especially after she found out he had muscular dystrophy. Over the past few years, Ryan had been pushing her to let Zach just be a kid. She was hesitant at first, but when she realized it was the best thing for Zach, they had been having fun ever since. I like that. I really, really like that. I liked that in the story, in the course of the story, you show his relationship with his mom and the love she has for him. How important is it, do you think, for, when you tell stories about children with disabilities, the mother most of the time is usually an important aspect of that story. She's an important part of that child's life. Definitely. The father is usually there, but sometimes just quite marginal, but it's usually the mother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How important do you think a mother's role is in the life of a child with special needs? Do you think that, because there's the father too, but everything in the end falls on the shoulders of the mother?
It does. It does. I've definitely had some fathers, in my teaching career, who it was the father. There definitely, but the majority of the time, yes, it is the mother. And I mean, looking at my own mother, so my brother is severely cognitively impaired, and my mom, he's 42, and he lives in a home with 2 other kids with constant staff, but she has him constantly, because if he gets sick, she has him for a week. You know, if he hurts his foot, then she has him for a week. You know, like she still, when he's 42, is still taking care of him. And then, you know, as kids, yeah, it's so, and Zach's own mother, I mean, she, you know, when Zach was getting worse, where he couldn't go outside in the cold, her and his older brother as well actually moved to Arizona the last couple of years of his life, because she wanted him to be able to be outside more. And, you know, in Michigan, it was too cold for him to go out for so many months of the year. And so, I mean, she even just picked up and moved halfway across the country for her son. So, I mean, moms do amazing things.
Moms are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So what roles do fathers play in the lives of children with special needs? Because talked about enough. It's not, I realize that it's not talked about enough. In African cultures, like where I'm from, everything falls on the mom. Because when a child with special needs is born, the first person accused is the mother. And in the care of that child, everything you realize is because Nigeria is a very patriarchal society. That's where I'm from. I'm from Nigeria. It's very patriarchal. So the mother, the home affairs is your business. So what role do you think fathers play in the lives of children with special needs?
Well, I think it totally depends on the family, because I have a lot of dads actually that currently that are doing amazing things with their children. Like they're some of the primary people that I'm contacting email wise. So it really depends on the family. I've had, you know, kids in the past where it's also been the father. I know, like my own dad, he passed away when he was 54. But for my brother, growing up, like my mom worked the day shift and he worked the night shift so that he could get my brother off the bus. Okay. You know, just for that reason, that's why he worked the night shift, so he could get my brother off the bus. And so I think there's definitely so many dads that do sacrifice for their kids with disabilities. It just depends on the family structure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you think that as authors of diverse stories, we can come together to put our voices out there? How do you think we can do this successfully? Because it is tough, especially if you self-publish. I mean, if you use the big publishers, they have all the networks. But for people who self-publish, you have to do most of the marketing yourself, unless you have money to pay marketing consultants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, marketing is the worst part of this.
Yes. So how do you think, as authors of diverse and representative stories, how do you think we can collaborate to put our voices out there? How do you think we can do this?
Well, one of the things that recently, just last weekend actually, I was asked to speak at a teachers conference. And so I actually spoke about, you know, diversity in books. And I put together a list of different authors. A lot of them were self-published authors, list with diverse characters. It was mainly with kids with disabilities. Okay. But then I also collaborated with another self-published author who created a blog on any type of diversity. So that's been great, you know, like getting with other authors and doing that. And then, you know, putting together lists of different books that can help teachers in the classroom. Being a teacher, I'm always thinking about teachers and how we can get these books into classrooms, because that's ultimately getting the kids, you know, being more inclusive in the classrooms is going to just make it a better world.
Oh, that's beautiful. My very first job was as an English teacher. So I taught classes of children between the ages of 6 to 12. Okay. And because I write for adults and kids, I'll show you some of my books. Mm-hmm. So I write about African history. So I have the Africa is Not a Country series. So this one is about African hair. Mm-hmm. And this one is about indigenous African animals. And the reason why I started this series is because I realized that we don't have enough to see about hair.
Yes.
I started this because I realized that we don't have enough diverse books in our classrooms. Mm-hmm. Because growing up, I read the Peter and Jane series, I read Enid Blyton, Nancy Drew, all of that. Mm-hmm. I realized that we didn't have, what was missing from the curriculum was African stories. Mm-hmm. And when I say African stories, I mean African stories told by Africans, authentic stories. Mm-hmm. Because the stories we had were the colonized versions. So that was why I decided to start to write about African history, because the history we had read about when we were growing up was about Columbus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one question I always used to ask, yes, when they say Columbus, what are the countries they claimed he discovered? And the first question I asked, and even the River Niger that runs past through Nigeria, I asked, if Columbus discovered these places, were they empty islands? And did he bring people there? What about the people that existed on those islands? Mm-hmm. So there's no way he could have. That is a lie. There's no way. Yeah. So it's like me, going to Europe, just walking into Europe and telling people, oh, I discovered Europe. I discovered a pack of living somewhere. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. So because of that, I decided, you know what? Let me start writing about African history. Let me start introducing diverse books into classrooms. Because these are the things many people in different communities experience. Just like this, your book now, I can't remember there coming across a book with of a child with a disability. Most of the time when you read books of people with disabilities, either they are the villains in the stories, or there is just something you don't understand going on there. Which for me I find pretty weird. So that's why I want to say thank you for this. That is, they need to start to understand, okay, this child is a little different from me, and this child does things a little different. If I'm able to run up the stairs, that child might not be able to run up the stairs, but it doesn't mean he or she can't get up the stairs.
Right.
Yeah, that they can do that.
Right. Yeah. And there are quite a few books out now, really in the last 5-ish years, that talk about the disability. And I think those are important to have. There's a lot of books recently on autism. And so I think that's good, so kids can relate, but mine, I feel like is a little different just because I didn't want, I wanted a chapter book to read to my students that wasn't all about the disability, they were just represented. And that's what I think a lot of Black authors have done is getting, that's what they did, it's not, they're not all about, it's important to have, it's important to have both types, right? So Black authors now are writing a lot of books that aren't necessarily, like you had somebody on, that wrote a book about gardening and nutrition and stuff.
Yes, Stacey. Yes.
And so, her books aren't necessarily just about the first one was, just about nutrition. And then there happened to be Black characters in it, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want it just those other books are so important too. We need those books that are discussing the disability. But I wanted mine just to be a fun adventure, and that kids can then see themselves in it. Okay. And I actually have had teachers, I had one teacher tell me, literally, she had a kid that was like, hey, he's in a wheelchair like me. And then literally another girl in the class went, she has a crutch like me. And I was like, it made my heart sore because it was.
Yeah, because when I read it, when I was reading through the books, I was so touched, and I went, yeah, for the first time, I'm not seeing anybody just emphasizing, he's in a wheelchair, this one uses a crutch, this other child has Down syndrome. You were writing about them as people. Mm-hmm. Yes, as beautifully imperfect people like we all are. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So what would you like to see for your books? What would you like to see when you think about the future? What would you like for your books?
I would love them in every elementary school. I would like them on every home library. Honestly, that's what I would like. Because as we've talked about, I feel like that diversity needs to be there. The inclusive aspect is really important.
Okay, so are you working on anything new that you want to talk to us about?
Well, book 3 we haven't started yet, so that I'm thinking we'll start over spring break. And then, but I actually did also just write a book with my mom. My mom has had this story in her head from a day when my brother was at Special Olympics. Okay. And it was from when he was little, but she just remembers this day so vividly. And for years, she's talked about this story and she should write a book, like before I even started writing books. And so I was like, you just need to do it. And she just didn't do it. And so I was like, I'll help you. So what we ended up doing with this book was, so it's her story, but we made it into a lot. So with a lot of kids with disabilities that you can't read yet, we'll use books that have repetitive line. There's also something called core words. So kids that can't verbally speak, it's like research based about which words are most important. And so on communication devices, words like I want it, like those type of things are the primary words that are used, that they can use throughout the entire day. Like certain words that are like we say out loud are the ones that are considered core words. So what we did with the book was it has a repetitive line. So the kids, even if they can't read it, they can become involved in the story because they'll see the pattern. And then, or we can, people can put it on communication devices, whatever, so that they can read along. And then it has the core words as well. So they should already be on their communication devices so they can read the book. So it's a picture book, so it's not a chapter book. And it's just a story about our family, kind of like how each person in the family did a sport and we all helped, or we all celebrated them. So like, where do you want to celebrate? And we cheered each other on. And then at the end, then my brother got a turn and he got to, be in a race, and then it was his turn. So it's really a sweet story about family in the end, supporting each other. And that one, as I said, it's a picture book. So it's different than the other ones I'm doing. And I'm hoping it'll come out in about 3-ish months. We're currently working on illustrations for it. So.
Okay. Oh, that's lovely. So I don't forget, talk to us about the second book, The Missing Grannies.
Yeah. So the missing grannies part of it was idea of my son. And it was just like, wait, what? Like, won't kids be like worried their grandma's going to be missing? Like, how can we make this book funny? And then it also was my mom actually was like, you should do like a granny one, because, but I think she was like, because she's a grandmother. And so she's like, grandmas would like to buy books for their kids. So that would be a good idea. And then, so with that kind of idea, and then my son like figuring it out, like different ways to do it, we made it funny. So it's not like scary,
Initially I was thinking, missing grandmothers, hope nothing bad happened to them.
Right. But you're right. They don't think that they're actually missing. So it's all in fun.
Yeah, because I saw them chilling and I'm wondering, okay, because when I saw the title, before I opened it up, I just had to, oh no, what could have possibly happened to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what gave you the inspiration for the story of the missing granny?
So that's like I said, the inspiration was kind of those two things. My mom was mentioning grannies and stuff, and then I actually did put in all of my grandma's names because I name a lot of grandmas in there. Okay. And coming from a divorced family, I have a lot of grandmas, and then and so they're all in there, and then, it was just like a story of like coming up with an adventure of how we can save the grannies. And, I want all his friends involved. It's not just Zach. I just said Jack. It's not Zach. being the only one because he needs his friends, and that's actually one of his mom's rules is he has to have his friends with him when he's on his adventures. So that was it was just kind of like a fun idea that we were like, how can we make this work?
Okay, so how important do you think relationships between grandmas and grandchildren is? How important do you think this relationship?
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah,
it is. And I think that's what I tried to capture in it was like the love between, grandchildren. I had great relationships with my grandmas and also my grandpa. And so then I felt like I like didn't get my grandpa in there. So I did like one line about my grandpa where like I said something about Christmas pudding or something. And so then I got my grandpa in there a little bit too. So it's so important. I mean, it's just, it grows you. It's helps you develop who you are. And
yeah, because I feel that, I feel grandparents have this special, like as Africans, they have this special wisdom they pass on to other generations because we believe in oral storytelling a lot. But when I hear of people, when I look at my parents and I look at them with their grandkids and I see that love, like my niece is 4, but she's so attached to my dad. And my dad calls her, they're on video calls, and I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Does she understand Grandpa? Does Grandpa understand her? But yes, but they understand each other.
Yeah.
So nice. So I'm able to see that in my parents and their grandchildren.
Yeah. So in a way, I was blessed that I came from a divorced family because having 4 sets, I was closer with like 2 of them more than I was the other 2. But, and I had different relationships with my grandmas than I did with my grandpas too. I even had my great grandma until I was like 20. And she was the best fisherwoman. So that was actually like part of I say something about, I went fishing with my grandma this weekend. That was my great grandma. That was yeah. So I tie in a little things from my life where, and I also said that in the book because people think about fishing with their dads,
Okay, Yes.
And
I've never thought of it with a mom or grandma.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a bad thing.
Exactly. And so I wanted to show that, because my great grandma was the one out fishing. So that happens and that's cool too. So I'm trying to represent like a lot of things going on.
Yeah. And how much input did Braden and Owen have in the writing, the development of the story till this? How much input did they have?
So Owen was kind of the idea kid. Like he would come up with some funny things and then I would work it into the writing. And then he kind of like was like, we went so slow with it that he kind of lost interest. And then toward the end, it was like, okay, wait. Like, I need you to figure this out with me, And so then he would brainstorm with me. And then Braden, he had more of a process with it. Like he would, when we got the, we would discuss ideas. He was much different to work with because he wanted an outline first and then like, well, what are we going to do in the second chapter before I even started writing it? And it was like, wait, I don't work like that. So it was really interesting, a different way to do it. But then I actually, in the long run, I kind of liked his way of doing it because it was like, we had the whole plan out, And then, so I would like put most of the words together, but then I would go back and he helped a lot with the editing. So when we would get, edits back from the editor, then we would go over each line. Like, which one do you think is better? Like, I'm thinking this. And most of the time we were agreeing. And then, so he did have more of a part of it where, it was really helpful actually, to like have another second eyes to run things past.
Yeah.
So.
I always I think you are the second author who has authored a book with her child. The first one, Stacy, was with her daughter. My daughter was actually on, and I got her to read a letter from the book, which I felt was really, really sweet. So when you wrote to me and you said Braden and Justin, no,
Owen.
Oh, Braden and Owen weren't interested. I went, oh yeah, boys.
Yeah. So I put it in the font of it is in it's called Open Dyslexic. So, and then I also have short chapters. So I did that on purpose for kids that don't like to read. So even though a child might not be dyslexic, the Open Dyslexic font kind of helps them.
Oh, really?
To get in easier. Yeah. And then it's also there's certain formatting that is easier to read, and that's the format that I use, as well as the color of the paper is not stark white, because that also makes it harder for people to read.
Oh, so this helps dyslexic children? Okay.
Yeah. So I really tried to think about every aspect of it when that could help any struggling reader. And then I've recently another author friend had her kid reading it, and she thinks he's dyslexic. He's not, hasn't been diagnosed, and he just doesn't like to read. And she said that he loved my book. Oh. And so I was so happy to hear that, because it's like that's what I want to do, is get these reluctant readers reading. So
dyslexic. Okay, I'm gonna look that up. Yeah, I didn't ever think about that. I didn't know that. Yeah. Well,
I got in some dyslexic Facebook groups as well, and there's on the third book I might change the font to something that people in the dyslexic community are liking more. But so far I have had kids that do like this font as well. So so yeah, I'll research on it.
Yeah, Andrea, I'm so happy to have had this chat with you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And
thank you so much for having me.
Oh no, thank you more. If people want to buy your books, where can they find your books to buy?
So they can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. And then my website is kurthbooks.com.
Okay. So, and what are your social media handles? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
I'm not on Twitter, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, okay. My Facebook community is pretty active, and they help me with different ideas, different title ideas. The Case of the Missing Grannies came from them. I think I originally wanted it like The Granny Thief or something like that. So they're a nice active group.
Yeah, because I have a private page and I have an author page. So I always like to follow with that author page and have people follow back. Then some people also follow my private page. So yeah, so we can follow each other. So what's that page called?
So on Instagram and Facebook, it's ZAC'S Mighty Wheels.
ZAC'S Mighty Wheels. Okay.
Yeah.
And on Facebook. Okay. So thank you so much, Andrea.
You so much. This was great talking with you.
Yeah, likewise. Everybody go buy these books, go learn, and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So thank you once again.